Finally, we come to the most outstanding railway personality of the past 50 years. This is sponsored by Ian Alling Publishing. The company owned Modern Railways for virtually all of its 50 years before selling it to our new owners, Key Publishing, earlier this year. So could David Allen, chairman of Ian Allen Publishing, join me? Here he comes. Right, this is a bit of an autobiographical ramble, but I'm sure you won't mind. So we start with Dr. Richard Beeching. No doubt yes, I thought there might be some of that. There's an excellent article. This is the commercial break. There's an excellent article on Beeching in the latest blockbuster Postman Rupturing Modern Railways from a new book by Chris Austin, and it looks at the man and puts him into perspective. Before you boo, buy a copy and read it. Another one from the 1960s is Jerry Fine's. His book, I Tried to Run a Railway, is regularly read today by senior directors I know. It really is a manual on running a railway, and it applies whoever it's owned by, however it's structured. Gerard Fine's Shot My Fox. My first big article in Modern Railways in 1966 was called Strong Case for the Super Deltics, and I sat back and thought, this is going to make things happen. Unfortunately, in the same issue was Jerry Fine's article, which actually got him the sack. So mine was totally ignored, and Fine's got all the glory, but he got sacked for it as well. We publish, once again in this commercial break, once again we publish excerpts from the article that got him the sack in the latest Modern Railways. In the 1970s, leading into the 80s, we have Sir Peter Parker. To my shame, I underestimated PP. I thought he was too nice. I was all for people going out and hitting politicians on the nose, as you know. PP was much more subtle. He was a great man, a great friend, and what he did was not schmooze them, but he delivered. And I remember him saying to me once, "I know I've succeeded, Roger, if a railwayman is the new chairman." And of course, PP ensured that Sir Bob Reid was the chairman as they came into the 1980s, and then followed BR's golden age. So Sir Peter Parker, sadly missed, and a great man. And finally, next we have PP's successor, Bob Reid. Sir Robert Reid was, I think, what you'd call a dour Scot, but by heavens, he could run a railway. There's an article by, sorry to keep plugging this, but it's a superb issue. There's an article by John Prideaux in the latest issue about how he was appointed to Intercity. And he said Bob Reid called him in. At the time he was in policy at the board. He said Bob Reid called me in and told me I was running Intercity next Monday morning. Now that is what I call management succession. That was typical of Bob. He once went into, I won't say which region, he went into a region, told the regional manager that he wasn't in the job in the Monday, but they'd find something else for him to do at the board. He really ran the railway. On press trips, he would come up to me and say, "Roger, are my people looking after you?" And I always thought, what would happen if I said no? But I always said yes, because they did. And finally, we come to someone who's here today, who's enjoyed a railway career stretching back decades at the top of the industry. It's Chris Green. Now, Chris Green is in fact lucky to be here because I nearly got him the sack back in the 1970s when he was running ScotRail. Chris was a force unto himself, of course, and ScotRail, it was a fatal error sending him to Scotland because it was 400 miles away from the British Railways Board, which was even better than being at Waterloo, which was on the other side of the Thames from British Railways Board. And in Scotland, he saw all these HSTs sitting around at Edinburgh doing nothing for hours. So he thought, well, I could use that marginal time and I'll use them to run some services within Scotland. The trouble was that the speed limits in Scotland wouldn't allow HSC, wouldn't give a journey time to get them back to pick up their their working back to London. So Chris had a word with his civil engineer, like-minded man, and they introduced differential speed restrictions so that whereas a normal train could do 80, HST could do 100. And they brought in these new speed boards, differential speed boards, which had sort of 80, HST 100. And I was doing some work for an advertising agency in Dundee, and we were driving with the managing director of the ad agency alongside the railway, and suddenly at the top of the embankment I saw this differential speed restriction board. I said, stop, stop. He said, why? I said, I've got a picture of that. And he thought, strange man, why do I employ him? So I scrambled up the embankment, no high-vis jacket, I admit, and took a picture of this board and published it in Modern Railways. The next thing is I have Chris on the phone saying, what are you playing at? And I was being called down to the board because the board didn't know what had been going on. But being Chris, he survived that, and we're still friends. There was also, we must not forget, for the noughties, John Armitt. John came to the railways at a very difficult time when rail track was collapsing and stayed with it into the Network Rail and provided vital stability as the railway recovered. And it's hard to remember just how bad it was after the collapse of rail track. He left the railways and went on to make the Olympics a huge success, delivering it on time and to budget. So, here is the winner of the man of the 50 decades, 5 decades, Chris.